So I put out a list every single week of just, and it's not whole-assed. I would say it's three-quarter-assed about, just real quick, the quarterbacks I like. And, boy, there is a lot. I tell you, everybody hates one name on that for one reason or another. And I thought, guys, I cannot right now. Like, there's no name you could say to me that I could probably say absolutely not to. Because I think we're looking at QBs totally different than what we did 10 years ago. And I think there's a lot of guys who have a lot of different skill sets, and I think it'd be very short-sighted for me in September to say absolutely not to anybody. Also, do you think that this draft class can save Andrew Berry's job?
Potentially.
Well, let's talk to Dane Brugler about it. From The Athletic NFL, DP Brugler on Twitter. He's on the fan hotline. Hello, Dane.
Good morning, guys. How are you?
We're doing very well. The rookies have played very well for the Cleveland Browns so far. I don't know how good their season's going to be. Do you believe that would be enough to keep Andrew Berry employed past 2025?
As long as ownership is realistic about what this team is and, what the next 2-year, 3-year plan is. I mean, I was sitting at the 50-yard line watching that game on Sunday, and watching the impact that those rookies had was really fun. And, I mean, this team, I don't have to tell you guys this team has not had a single top 50 draft pick the last 3 years. Mm-hmm. And that just the decimation of that roster with young talent is evident. But it's so important for, especially, and let's just take the quarterbacks out of the equation at this point, Gabriel and Sanders, the 4 picks they had in the top 67. It's so critical for those guys, that core, to be productive this year, show promise, and we saw that on Sunday with, obviously your eye goes directly to Myles Garrett, but Mason Graham was awesome on the defensive line. Fannin, he's still breaking tackles out there. Judkins was running into a lot of brick walls, but finally in the fourth quarter, he was able to break through and pop a few. And Schwarzenegger is awesome. I mean, the closing speed, the instincts, he's going to be a really special linebacker. So I think that the promise of this rookie class and the reality check of where this team is right now, I would be pretty surprised if the head coach and general manager are not calling the shots this upcoming offseason.
Well, you use the term, Dane, special to talk about Schwarzenegger, and obviously there's been a lot to get excited about for all these guys, but I told Ken over the last few days, it's good to have, really good draft picks, but they are in such a hole because of the cap, because they still don't have a quarterback, obviously, for the future. Maybe Dillon Gabriel, maybe Shedeur Sanders, but we likely think they're going to be going back to the well in the first round next year, that they need special. Rookies just can't be good now. They need special because of how so many guys are aging out and the prior window is closing. So you said special. That one's going to resonate with me.
Well, and I think Schwarzenegger, there's so much to like about everything that he does, everything he's about. Former walk-on. I mean, you guys know his story. The way that he came out last year and just burst onto the scene, the way he played, the production, and the way that he's played so far as a rookie. He doesn't seem like a rookie. He plays like a guy that this is not too big for him. And this rookie group, they're all very, very young. I believe all 4 of those guys were underclassmen when they were drafted. So young guys with talent who they're giving these guys a chance. And so far, they're stepping up. And so, I would probably agree with you guys. I think the quarterback of the future is not on this roster. And so the big question becomes, is that quarterback going to be in this upcoming draft class? I mean, that's the whole reason they made that, traded away from Travis Hunter and got that extra first-round pick so they could be in a position to go get that quarterback next April. But the question will be, is that quarterback even going to be available for them?
Well, Dane, that was going to be kind of my next thing. Am I allowed to take a victory lap yet, or is it still way too soon of Mason Graham being the trade bait or being taken with the trade with the Jacksonville Jaguars where they took Travis Hunter? Because, I'm trying to pay attention to some things in Jacksonville, and I've read more articles than I've watched games, but there's a lot of arguments about, maybe this two-way thing isn't working. And this is something Lyman and I foresaw back in the spring where it's like, hey, man, you got to get off the field. There's a lot of things that you just have to be smarter with the NFL and be ready for than you had to be in college football, where Mason Graham, boy, he's really kicking ass and taking names right now.
Well, and we've had what, a 3-game sample size. I don't think there's enough there to make any definitive statements. But I think this is predictable, right? I mean, the idea of knowing a full NFL playbook, offense and defense, and then going out there and playing like a Pro Bowl level player, like that's just not realistic for a rookie. But by the end of the year, I do expect Travis Hunter to be a guy that we look at and say, okay, yeah, he was worth that top 3 pick, and he's making an impact on both sides of the ball. This is so rare what we're seeing with him, and so it's going to take a little bit of time, I'm sure. But I wouldn't be surprised either if at the end of the season we look back and neither the Jaguars or the Browns regret making that trade.
All right, Dave. So that brings us to what is a class that seems to be fluctuating depending on the week. And I do think people are getting a little crazy writing off guys because they watch one game in college football and say, well, that's it. That guy can't be the number 1 overall pick. And that can't be the quarterback of the future. I'm like, well, Patrick Mahomes had some bad college games too. So Josh Allen had pedestrian numbers. So when you look at this class right now, how evolving is it week to week for you?
Well, I love that you said that because it's so true. A lot of people watched Drew Aller 2 years ago and made up their mind about who he is as a quarterback prospect. And that's just, it's not how this works. And it's kind of the difficult part of doing this in a week to week where it's like one game is not going to make or break a prospect's draft projection, especially a quarterback. But with that said, I do think there's a little more emphasis on a weekend like this one coming up where Drew Aller, Dante Moore, Oregon going to Penn State, like that's a tape that, there's going to be a lot of NFL personnel in the stadium watching that live, but every single team is going to be watching this tape. So this is one that matters in a big way. It's okay to put a little extra emphasis on it. But yet, as a whole, this quarterback class, here's the thing, and this is the asterisk I've kind of been mentioning with this quarterback class. The excitement is really based off of a lot of young players realizing their potential. And the early feedback is that young talent just isn't there yet. Arch Manning, Dante Moore, Aiden Childs, Sam Levitt, a lot of redshirt sophomores in there, younger guys. If the draft were held tomorrow, I still think Lenora Sellers would be that first quarterback drafted. But he just turned 20 years old. He's still very much a work in progress as a passer, and there's no guarantee he'd even be in this draft class because with NIL, that's really changed the game for quarterbacks, especially. Lenore Sellers could come out, and I think he'd be right there in the mix to be the first quarterback drafted, or he could go back to South Carolina, get better, and earn $3 million, and still be in a position in the 27 draft to be one of the first quarterbacks. So this is a quarterback class, like you said, very much in flux. I think that with Garrett Nussmeier is from LSU. He's the top senior this year, pretty clearly, and I think it's up to Drew Aller to see if he can kind of change the narrative on that one. And that's going to start Saturday. It hasn't been a great first 3 games for Penn State in terms of that offense, and Aller in terms of just really maximizing, beating up on some lesser competition. So now at home in the whiteout against a pretty good Oregon defense, let's see what you got, Drew Aller.
Dane Brugler joining us here on the show. I want to get back to our quarterbacks that we have on this roster here in just a moment. But, you mentioned Garrett Nussmeier. And I put out a list every single week, and I put Garrett Nussmeier at the top. My timeline hates Garrett Nussmeier. Why? Why are my listeners wrong? Why does the NFL have him so high?
Well, I think that we have to look at these quarterbacks and kind of like, what's the projection with each one of these guys? It's not enough to say like, oh, he's a top 3 pick, top 5. That's not how we should be looking at quarterbacks. We should be projecting them in terms of role. So, is Garrett Nussmeier, is he a high-end starter? Is he a mid-level starter, low-end starter? And in my opinion, he projects as a mid-level starter. And so if you're looking for that high-end starter, no doubt about it, top 3 pick, I do not think that's Garrett Nussmeier. Now, if you're looking for someone who I think is a mid-level NFL starter projection, then I think Nussmeier is certainly in that conversation and somebody that you need to be considering. But if you're drafting top 5, that projection might not be good enough for what you want. Maybe you want to try and thread the needle and pass on a quarterback and try again the following year. But it's tough. It's the Browns. Obviously they've not been very lucky in terms of having the top pick when the obvious quarterback was there. They came back in 99, 1 year after Peyton Manning went number 1 overall in 98, and we could go year by year, and they've kind of just missed. Now you could argue that they should have taken maybe Josh Allen number 1 overall instead of Baker, and a lot of hindsight involved there. But with a guy like Garrett Nussmeier, who he's not very big. There is some Baker Mayfield to him because the size doesn't blow you away. The arm is good, not great, but he just has full command of the offense. If you want a guy that does actual quarterback things in terms of setting protections, understanding pre-snap what's going on, and then is able to go through his reads and work the pocket and again, do all those quarterback-centric things, he does that at a high level. And it's not really a surprise considering his dad's a longtime quarterback coach, offensive coordinator in the NFL. But I do understand those that are not huge fans of Garrett Nussmeier, if they're looking for that high upside, the guy that you would take top 3, no doubt, because I don't think Nussmeier is necessarily that guy.
Is there that guy in this coming draft?
It's hard to see it right now. Like I said, I think Lenora Sellers is probably the number 1 quarterback if the draft were held tomorrow. But he's still very much developing. You watched the game over the weekend against Missouri. He will make. There's a handful of throws on that tape that make you sit up and say, "Yeah, that's a guy right there who is got elite potential." But then you watch the lowlights and where the inconsistencies pop up, and again, you see how young he is. Just turned 20 years old. The dual threat ability is a big part of why you love Lenora Sellers. This sounds hyperbolic, but he is the strongest quarterback I've ever evaluated. And that's no disrespect to Jalen Hurts or Cam Newton, it's just different with Lenora Sellers. And so that dual threat ability is a big part of why you are excited about what he's going to be at the next level. But again, the development as a passer, that's where it's just going to take some time with him, and it's going to take a little bit of patience.
All right, maybe... Dane, this is more of a Sports Talk Radio question than a draft analyst, so you can laugh me out of the room on something like this. But Dillon Gabriel and Shedeur Sanders, if they were in this year's draft, are they getting drafted earlier? Because a year ago, people made it seem like last year's quarterback draft was abysmal, and that, if they were in the next one, they'd be pushed back even further.
Yeah, and obviously the Shedeur conversation's tough. No one saw him going in the 5th round, and I think that had more to do than just what was on the field. And Gabriel went higher than I think a lot of people thought. So I mean, I don't think necessarily that either one would go significantly higher or lower in this class. We're not sure what this class is going to look like yet, because so many of these guys that we're maybe possibly excited about, they're underclassmen. We just don't know if they're going to come out or if they're going to go back to school. Fernando Mendoza, what he's doing in Indiana is kind of exciting. But they've got a big game coming up at Oregon. Then they're at Penn State later. Those will be 2 big tests that'll tell us more about Mendoza. I would say this about these quarterbacks: keep an open mind to everybody, just because. If Joe Burrow after his junior year at LSU would have been a 3rd-round pick. Jaden Daniels after his 3rd year at Arizona State would have been a 5th-round pick. Like, some guys, it takes time. And Drew Aller took a big step between his sophomore and junior years. If he takes another step now as a senior, all of a sudden, he's going to look a lot more appealing as a prospect. And so I would just say to everybody, keep an open mind on these quarterbacks in college. Guys get better, they grow, they develop, and the body of work is ultimately what's going to be what matters, and whether or not this team drafts a quarterback.
Wild, unfair question. Here we go. If Dillon Gabriel had to start Sunday against the Lions, do you think he'd be ready?
I do, because that's why you drafted him in the top 100 picks, is because he's smart. He understands the offense. He doesn't wow you physically, but what wins with him is what's between the ears. And so I have no doubt. I think he'd be just fine to operate the offense. Not saying it would look amazing, not saying they would win the game, but I think he'd be fine to run the offense. Yeah.
That's a hell of a comment. Dane Brugler, follow him on Twitter at DP Brugler on social media. Dane, thank you very much for the time.
All right, anytime. Go Tribe.
Dane, well, yeah, that's right. He's from here.
Threw it in there.
That's right. He's from here. Dane, thank you again, my friend, the great Dane Brugler from The Athletic. He's a Cleveland fan. He's from the area. Good man and thorough.